Thank you everyone for coming. It's wonderful to see such a fantastic turnout of people that care about sustainable energy as much as we do. So I am here to introduce our wonderful speakers that we have for today and then help facilitate some question and answer. So during their presentations, if there's anything that's quite pressing or you need some clarification, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll try and get to you. But if you can save discussion questions for when all the panelists have finished, then we'll have some time left for some good dialogue at the end. So first up, we have Betsy. Betsy oversees Renewable Cities research and collaborates with global colleagues working to accelerate the growing 100% renewable energy movement and designing engaging dialogues aimed at exposing barriers to implementation. Betsy joined Carbon Talks in 2013 and is a founding team member of Renewable Cities. She holds a Professional Engineers of Ontario license and a Master's in Applied Science, both of which trained her in her skills she now applies in her work at the SFU Center for Dialogue. Betsy.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's always a little odd hearing your life story kind of read out to a crowd, but I appreciate that, Jessica. What she hasn't told you is that my kids have the privilege of babysitting Jessica's kids, and they're quite delightful. So it's an honor to be here. Really pleased that you've invited me. I really am impressed by the turnout that you have. I've heard that you have a very active chapter, and this is evident to that. When I first walked in, I was super impressed by the pool. And being relatively new to BC, when was that pool built? 94. So how many of you were really engaged in the discussion on that pool? We have one person in the back there. Was it a professional role or was it as a citizen? A community role. Well, applause to you. I have one more question. How many of you walked into this room without knowing anyone? Look at that. That's really great, because this is, how you're going to really spread this and start to multiply. So hopefully you've spent some time with your new best friends at the table, getting to know each other. I want to talk a bit about what we do at the Center for Dialogue. Our focus is, of course, dialogue, this kind of conversation. We tend to, in the group that I work in, discuss at a stakeholder level, but we have some public participation events, and we certainly, our sister programs, do lots of community programming. So at the Center for Dialogue, we really are focused in engagement. Dialogue is a particular process, and you're going to have a taste of what it means. We want to minimize the amount of talking from the front of the room and really get lots of ideas from you folks. As Jessica mentioned, I have kind of a funny background. Who doesn't? But I started out in civil engineering, and it was in the 90s, and unfortunately for most of BC, it was during the leaky condo episodes. That was actually quite interesting to those of us studying building science, so I thank you for being our guinea pigs, because learned quite a bit about how to build and how not to build. And so when I came out of engineering, I was, this eager 20-something, ready to change the world, but I just spent a whole bunch of time doing structural engineering, and all I saw was new build, new build, new build. It was all about sprawl. And I became a little bit disillusioned, quite disillusioned, and so I left. And when we moved 6 years ago to BC, I found Carbon Talks, which was about convening dialogues around a low-carbon economy. And if you know Carbon Talks, we have been running public talks and stakeholder engagement for about 7 years. And we talk about anything from finance to transportation to built environment. And it was a natural setup for us when we needed to really rethink what we wanted to do as our next funding term came up. And at that time, 2014, we were mulling what was really coming on scene, and it was renewable energy. And we also realized that we needed to be having bigger conversations with lots of different people. At the same time, where the effort is and really where the action takes place is at the municipal level. So lots of times people will say to you, you know, why cities, why renewable energy? For me, renewable energy is an answer to a problem that we've been talking about for years. And instead of working with a problem anymore, it's time for us to be working on solutions. And the city level, it may feel like we're powerless a lot of times, but until we actually start using the tools we actually have and start formulating an idea about where we want to go, then the other powers that be that have to play with us aren't going to move. So even if you think you're facing something at the moment, I think you need to keep that perspective that we need to keep pushing. So in what we do, I have the privilege of working with lots of different municipalities, not just in Canada. And recently we went down to San Francisco and convened a dialogue with US cities. And I want to point out that in very little time, we've gone from very few municipalities that were committed to 100% renewable energy to 20. And of those 20, 3 of them are in Canada. So that's about 15% of the communities that are committed to 100% renewable energy, and we're 1/10 their population. So Canada's showing leadership. In fact, I recently read an article that Canada is globally known for being a clean tech hub. We're actually exporting more than half, almost half of what we're creating. And so it's not uncommon for you to go overseas and find out that it's a Canadian company that's delivering some renewable energy technology or process. So why is it that we're not taking that and really developing out our clean tech market at the same time? We need to be starting to rethink what we're going to do with all that knowledge. Why are we shipping it overseas? And when it seems like it would be really hard to get to renewable energy, I'm showing you a picture of a graph that tells the Vancouver plan. I mean, it's a strategy at the moment. They haven't figured out the little nitty-gritty. And what I've popped out there is the proportion that they're going to have to come to or achieve is actually energy efficiency. So nearly half of Vancouver's projected energy needs under its renewable city strategy is going to be achieved through energy efficiency. And that's a big deal, partly because that's what we're already working on. Even if we are thinking, forget it, we don't care, we want to just stick with the same system, we're all starting to think that energy efficiency is really important, and it is. Why would we waste these resources? There are financial benefits to being more efficient and being more conservative, and then there are also environmental benefits, which for me is a good news story. Energy efficiency is the major piece that's actually going to get us to 100% renewable energy, and we know how to do it. And just to echo the importance of energy efficiency, this is an overview of a strategy that a small township in Germany, Osnabrück, took. They were trying to figure out how are we going to get all these buildings to move on energy efficiency strategies. And they rented a plane with a pilot and did a thermography overview of the buildings. And what they showed were certain buildings, of course, that were letting out tons of heat. So it's a heat map. So you see red roofs where there's lots of heat loss. You see blue roofs where it's well insulated and the heat stays inside. And one of the things that they did was they recognized that they need to be sitting in these types of rooms with the people who were going to have to take those actions. And it was about engagement. It was about really getting the public to come and participate in this. So they found these areas where, the houses at the time weren't well insulated when they were developed. And they would plant these, little temporary satellite offices. And they had people there who could give energy advice on what they could do. And there they were, sitting in the middle of the community after work hours and on weekends. And they provided, basic advice. And then also it led to lots of online engagement, and then eventual energy audits and consultation, which was a really forward-thinking strategy that didn't actually cost them a lot of money. So this Osnabrück example is just one tiny sample of the kind of action that's taking place in Germany. And based on those actions, there's an academic named Peter Moser who looked at all these 46 municipalities, or however number it was, and developed a model. He mapped out what are the patterns, what are all the things that people have to be thinking about when they're thinking about going to 100% renewable energy. And he mapped it out, and the original German version has about 33 of these patterns. They recognized how valuable this tool was and wanted to translate it for the rest of the world to be able to use. So they truncated it down for the rest of us to be able to chew on. And it sits at about 12 criteria from, in this iteration, although I have the second generation of them, which is bumped down to 10 now. And what was interesting about these criteria is it says to us that the commitment to 100% renewable energy is much more than calculating the numbers of kilojoules that we need to meet and what that energy mix is going to look like and what's it going to cost us and what kind of GHG savings, all those heavy number things. And it tells us how much real community commitment we need, how deeply institutionalized these decisions need to be for it to really get somewhere. Is about addressing all the issues that city planners have to still address, so the equity issues and the environmental issues and other utilities that you have to, and services that you have to provide. 100% renewable energy becomes a core of all of that planning. And you know, a couple of them, one of them that stands out for me is criteria 4, which is titled institutionalization. So the thought on that is it just a commitment that the next council could ignore? Or is it something that's, you know, legislated? Is it something that upper levels of government, or say your utility regulators, are committed to and are also helping you move towards? It has all of those technical pieces, so it still looks at what's the energy mix, how are you dealing with your buildings and their efficiency, what are you doing with your transportation system? Everything from waste to water, you need to be thinking about all of these things. All of them feed into this idea of 100% renewable energy. This is an interesting tool, and in fact, we recently tested it in the district of Saanich, just to see what's on the books in Saanich and where they are in terms of moving towards 100% renewable energy. And the interesting part is that there are often a lot of councils find out they're already doing a lot of the things that they need to do. It's just they need to step it up. They need to do more. And Saanich was really no different. And I think that the more, you know, one of the things that we really focuses on is really sharing ideas between municipalities, because even if one municipality isn't the same as the other municipality, they often find similarities in terms of the problems that they're dealing with and maybe aspects of what the solutions will be. So this is back to my point about, for so long, we've been talking about the problem of climate change. And it becomes this really kind of intangible piece. You know, what is it? What are GHGs? We can't touch them. We don't really necessarily understand them. Similarly, our energy systems. We don't really look at our energy systems very often. They're ubiquitous. We can just assume that they're there all the time. And for me, the nice part about renewable energy is it gives us something to do about it. We have the faith that it's going to move us forward. And it's some action to take as opposed to mulling over the problem over and over again. So I think when I think about environmentalism when I was little, I can still picture myself in my school gym with like the David Suzuki message of put litter in its place. And that was our big environmental movement, was stop throwing garbage out of your car windows. I remember when recycling came in, you know, and that was how we were empowered. And if you think about that, it wasn't that long ago, a little longer than I'd like to admit. We've moved pretty far in the last some odd years. And so I think at that time it felt hopeful, And then, as I mentioned, I went through this period of a bit of disillusionment in my career. And I think that what I really, really want for my kids to remember at this point is kind of, I'd like them to be grateful. I'd like them to be grateful that we looked at this problem and we looked at a very real solution and we went after it. We did everything that we could to get to it. So I think my 4 kind of key points: we're part of a trend. Canada's on a leading edge, and that we can do better. We can take better advantage of everything that we're already doing. And that we already know how to do a huge piece of this, that energy efficiency is nearly half of what we're going to have to achieve. I just want to mention one more thing. So as I mentioned, our job is to convene stakeholders around these discussions. And we have a big forum that we hosted originally to open to really introduce our program. It was very well received, so we're doing it again this May. All of our materials are public, so any events that we do, we report on, and they're all available on our website. And I've left postcards that should tell you more about the Global Land Plan.
Great, thank you, Betsy. There's an interesting piece that I noted when you were speaking, that the idea of 100% renewable in these municipalities and cities isn't a 100% renewable plan or 100% renewable policy, but you said 100% renewable commitment. And I think that's a really important note, where you have all shown a commitment by showing up here today. But for there to be a true 100% renewable commitment, we need to remember what players do need to be part of that commitment and what levels. And I think keeping that in mind as you guys move forward through the day and through the discussions at the table, it's not just a plan or a policy, but it is a commitment. Our next speaker is Victoria Barr. She's a former president of the Public Health Association of BC and has been a faculty member in the School of Public Health and Social Policy at the University of Victoria and have been a research consultant for 17 years. Her focus areas include the ways in which our physical and built environments and our social environments interact to influence health and health equity. Victoria.
Hey, first of all, thank you so much for inviting me. And again, just like Betsy, I'd like to say it's really encouraging and exciting to see so many people in the room on a beautiful October afternoon. So I'm going to talk today about the connections between healthy communities and sustainable communities. So our efforts in terms of renewable energy, in terms of building more resilient communities, more sustainable communities, there's a lot of overlap between building healthy communities. And this can be really important because we can kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone in a way, but also because from what I see in my work, there are folks like you who are working on these wonderful issues in terms of climate change and renewable energy and lots of other issues that are important to our natural environments and our built environments. And there's also a whole other separate group of people working sort of in parallel, working on building healthier communities. And so I have a PhD in urban planning and a master's degree in health promotion. And so my goal in life, in my career in the next little while, is to try and figure out how to connect those things and how to get those 2 groups of people working together as much as possible so that we can be stronger together. So that's kind of part of the message that I bring today. So what is a healthy community? Well, a healthy community is basically where people work together as much as possible, and that all different groups of people across the diversity of our communities are able to achieve the potential that they have. So that's really important. And I'm not talking just about physical health here. I'm talking also about social health, which is super important, and also mental health, spiritual health. There's lots of different aspects of our health. And mostly I'm not talking about individuals necessarily. I'm talking about us as a group, us as a community, and how we connect together to work towards work towards a better, more sustainable, but also a healthier place for all. One of the ways that that I think of it as this sort of notion of sustainability is, and of course there's lots of different definitions for that. It's one of these terms that people, it's kind of a big term that people define in different ways. But one of the things about it, to me, that's important is that often it's seen as the three different sort of legs of the stool: the economic, the environmental, and the social. So those are the three aspects of sustainability people talk about, and we need to have those three aspects balanced out as much as possible, otherwise the stool will fall over. So often we're very focused on the environmental, or some groups of people who are very focused on the economic. And often the social, those aspects, those more, people kind of call it the soft stuff, gets sort of left out in these discussions. And so part of my role too is to encourage you to bring it back in, because those social pieces, though building communities that are inclusive and diverse and that allow people to have affordable housing, for instance, that address issues like child poverty, all those sorts of issues are really important for equity and for that building this nice community in which we can all thrive. And so we have to think about that too. That social bit is actually the most important for health. If we can do nothing more than to help people to get together and build more stronger connections with each other, that will have a huge impact on the health of our communities. So one of the ththings that I think about is how communities are designed too. And of course, we all know about urban sprawl, and if you're in a plane, you're looking down at a city, you can really get a sense of how it's organized, and that what we call built form. So one of the things that we look at in terms of the research end anyways is how the city is designed and how it's planned, and those decisions that happen at City Hall, how they have a huge impact on various parts of how we live. So of course, how cities are designed has an effect on our access to healthy foods, how we move from place to place, what neighborhoods we can live in and what we can't because of affordability, of course. The traffic safety and injury prevention, all these things are aspects of our lives that are really important for our health, which just makes common sense. So when we look at two different neighborhoods or two different communities, we can really tell, it's not rocket science, we can tell in general, we can get a sense of which is healthier. Now this picture on the left, I always think of that, I actually got this, anyway, I think of that as being, what's that road that IKEA's on in Richmond? When you go down? Bridgeport, thank you. That looks to me like Bridgeport Road, is it not to you, for those of you who are familiar with that area? Not very welcoming, not a place that you feel like you want to go out and walk down the street, walk the dog. As a parent, I have two kids, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm not sure I'd want to walk the kids down that street. It wouldn't be that comfortable. And so there's not a lot of interaction between people. There's not a lot of interaction between people and the place, because everyone's in the car. It's not an inviting place for people. The one on the right is much more inviting. There's interaction between people. There are benches to sit. There are coffee shops that have, these wide sidewalks. People can move about. We're looking at a mixed-use neighborhood, so we've got stores and residential areas and schools all in an area that people can walk to easily or cycle to. So that's what we call walkability. We've probably heard of that many times. So that's a more walkable neighborhood. It's also a healthier neighborhood in lots of ways. And again, it's pretty common sense. But in terms of the research, and the researchers are going nuts about this stuff, there's just so much happening in terms of new evidence coming forward. And one of these are all the different aspects of our health that have been shown through really cool research across the world to be connected to what we do, what decisions we make in local government, but also how our cities are organized and designed. Now, of course, that doesn't happen in a vacuum. Cities don't exist in vacuums. And so we also have to think about the effects of climate change on health, the effects of losing biodiversity, for instance, on health, our access to natural spaces. These are all big impacts as well in terms of our health as individuals and as communities and as families, actually. So this is a really cool model that I stole from a group in Bristol in UK, and it just gives you some idea of how complex this stuff is, how so many moving parts at the same time of people's lives, and how that has an impact on their health and on the health of the community. But one of the things that we think about too is not just about what we decide. So if the District of Saanich, in terms of their strategic plans, it's not just about what decisions they come up with in the end and what policies and that kind of thing they come up with. It's also about how that happens. So one of the key things we can do to, if we're making plans like this about renewable energy, for instance, and we're having discussions like this in this room, we need to be thinking about who is in the room. So look around you. Is anybody missing? Members of our community, different groups of people who are missing in the room. People without gray hair. Yeah. And that's often the case. And so we have to think about, okay, so who else in our community do we need to get involved in this process? And I can think of lots of them. I mean, as a parent, I don't know, I mean, maybe there are lots of parents in the room that have small kids, I don't know, but there's lots going on for those people. So it's hard to just sort of put food on the table sometimes and not, So to be part of a process like this, we need to figure out ways to reach out in a very explicit way and go where people are at, as opposed to expecting them to come to us all the time. Because so that process of reaching out and really thinking, okay, how can I put myself in the shoes of somebody who's living in poverty? How can I put myself in the shoes of somebody who has 3 kids and is working full time? How can I put myself in the shoes of a new immigrant to our community? And that sort of process of really thinking about that will help to improve equity and help to improve inclusion and acknowledge the diversity of the community. That is key for health, for a healthy community. So we should think about the process as well as the outcomes of what we're looking at. So just in terms of the health co-benefits, that's what I call it. So in terms of your efforts around renewable energy, there are lots of the health co-benefits and the other benefits we can think of. And so if we can do lots of things at once, let's do that, hey? So the first is, of course, designing communities and neighborhoods and streets that are really accessible. People can easily walk to and from, cycling, bike paths, all those good things. Of course, reduces GHG emissions. But it also meets a demand, and there's, so my father's a developer, and he and I have arguments all the time. And one of the things that he says is, Victoria, he said, there's, people don't want, like compact, complete communities that are really walkable. They want to have their big sprawly, with the big homes and the big, big lots and things like that. And so, but there's actually new research suggesting that that's actually not the case, that people would prefer to live in an environment which is, a more walkable neighborhood. The problem with that in Victoria is that often those are the most expensive neighborhoods, there's a challenge there, and we have to think about that too in terms of our planning. Accessibility, of course, and allowing those folks like children, seniors, people with disabilities to be able to access services, access the community is huge. And so thinking about issues of accessibility as we move forward in planning is really important. We can also actually save money in terms of infrastructure and save money for families as well. So there's the family thing, that families can actually save money on transportation costs if they're able to do without one car or use that car less often. So the key message to just here is we're better together, that there's lots of opportunity to think about community health as part of this conversation. There are lots of folks who are working on that area that we can bring into the conversation. And it does help people, in terms of the general public, also to relate to it, because we're all concerned about health, not just for ourselves, but for our neighbors and for our families. And so this is just another angle to think about as we move forward. So to me, I think of this as, I'm a big Venn diagram person, can you tell? But one of the things that to me is these common goals of having this flourishing environment, a vibrant and just society, and a prosperous economy, and trying to figure out, bring those together to end up with a more sustainable, healthier community in the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Victoria. So Victoria raised a number of points around why people would be interested in sustainability and interested in moving to 100% renewable energy. And so in thinking again of building that commitment, there's a lot of different reasons why people are going to come to the table. So you all might be here because you are passionate about renewables and greenhouse gas reductions, and maybe that's what you discussed at your tables when we had a little bit of an intro. But there's going to be people in the community that's not their priority. Their priority might be their children and feeding their kids, as she mentioned, or the economy and their jobs. So as we build these plans and strategies and build commitment and reach out to bring others into that commitment, we need to think of how we're going to address what their interests are and perspectives, and they're all valid interests and perspectives. So how do we bring everybody together into that big group with us and continue that commitment? Tom is now going to move us into the how. So he has done some fantastic research and analysis on what it would actually mean for Saanich to move to 100% renewables. So Tom Hackney is our policy director with the BCSEA, and he's also a very engaged and dedicated member of the Vancouver chapter, and he was part of the team that founded the BCSEA. Sorry? Did I say Vancouver? I'm sorry, Victoria. Too used to being in Vancouver. I apologize. So Tom also works with us at a provincial level involved in the BCUC hearings. So he has a lot of in-depth work with BC Hydro and Fortis Utility and the work at the BC Utilities Commission. So Tom will now present his research that he's done.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Betsy and Victoria, for your presentations. I've just been told that people have trouble seeing the slides, so please, if you have trouble seeing the slides, don't feel shy about rearranging your position, especially if you like pie charts. So this presentation is all about what I was doing this past summer instead of having a vacation, which was crunching numbers about the district of Saanich. So yes, we are talking about the district of Saanich here, right up to about Dooley Road, and not the whole peninsula. And of course, we are talking about the energy and emissions of the whole community, not just the municipal operations. So what is 100% renewable energy by 2050? This is such an exciting topic for me to be talking about. This is right at the core of why the BC Sustainable Energy Association exists. We're here to push this transition forward, and I hope you can get as excited about it as I do. We're largely motivated by climate change and avoiding those problems. And 100% renewable energy by 2050 is essentially a positively stated version of we need to cut out greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. So in general, what are we talking about? Instead of gasoline, diesel fuel for transportation, we need to use flowing water, wind, solar, photovoltaic energy, and other sources to generate electricity renewably. Instead of using natural gas, furnace oil, and propane for heat, we need to use solar hot water, air source and ground source heat pumps. We need to contain the energy in our homes way better, make our homes more efficient. Biomethane and biofuels may be used provided they can be done so that they are carbon neutral. They don't cause net additions to atmospheric carbon. So why 2050? Some people would say that's much too slow. Other people would say it's unrealistically fast to make a revolutionary change in society. It's a compromise number, and once we get going down the path toward 100% renewable energy, we can figure out whether we need to accelerate that pace or we can afford to slow it down. But let's get started now. So is this easy? No, a big challenge. Is it worth doing? My answer is yes, it very much is worth doing. The medium and long-term threat of climate change is just so big, and I think it's practically inevitable that we human beings are going to take this on. We are ultimately survivors, and especially the younger generation with their lives ahead of them are not going to want to give up on the future of humanity. So we might as well get started now. And we will more or less need to do everything we can to reduce emissions and switch to renewable energy. And we're going to have to get all of society on board, governments, businesses, individuals, everybody. And all over the world, people are rising to the challenge. You may be aware that the city of Vancouver has committed to a 100% renewable energy goal last year. Just this past summer, the city of Victoria made a similar commitment, and now they're scrambling to work out a plan for how they're going to do it. So in a moment, I'll get right to the analysis, the data analysis for Saanich, but this is essentially where the talk is going. Our goal is to persuade the district of Saanich, and we want you all to help us persuade the district or your own municipality, if you don't live in Saanich, to take this on. And to be clear, this study that I'm doing and the work we're doing so far has been commissioned by Saanich. They've provided a grant to fund it, but Saanich has not yet taken this up at council or committed to the goal. So that's the next step. And generally, the steps that we regard as critically important is public engagement, making the commitment to a 100% renewable energy by 2050 target, making a detailed plan, telling other levels of government what your expectations are, because obviously for something like a regional transportation system, Saanich can't do it alone. You need the whole regional district involved. And just in general, the way you approach council to make progress is council has made a lot of progress so far. Thank you for what you've done so far. Please go further. Give us more. So this is the district of Saanich now, 2016, population about 111,000, and total annual energy use about 10.2 million gigajoules of energy. 60% of the energy is used in buildings. That includes homes, retail, office, light industry, and it means space heating and cooling, mostly heating, ventilation, water heating, lighting, computers, television, etc. And 40% transportation, personal vehicles, commercial vehicles, and long-haul trucking. The waste that you see in a little note at the bottom refers to landfill, the Heartland landfill, which produces some methane gas but does not actually consume any energy. Nevertheless, we need to take that into consideration if we're going to become 100% renewable. And what are the main sources of our energy? Well, electricity at 39% comes to us courtesy of BC Hydro, and it is mostly clean and renewable, not producing greenhouse gases. Natural gas, 13%. Oil and propane, 6%. Wood, 2%. Gasoline and diesel fuel, approximately 40%, and this accounts for transportation. And by the way, for any of you who are interested in statistics, I believe we're going to be making all this information available on our website, so you can look it up. And this is the general picture in the Capital District. So Saanich at the top is the most populous municipality, and it also uses the most energy. The energy consumption patterns in the Capital Regional District are pretty similar from one community to the next. A fair proportion of renewable electricity, a little bit of wood energy used for heating homes, and over half of the energy from fossil fuels, and that's transportation and heating. And missing from the previous charts and diagrams is heavy industry. Saanich and the whole Capital Regional District have virtually no heavy industry, but at the provincial scale, as you can see from the pie on the right, the industry accounts for about 43% of energy use, and this is heat to process pulp, energy used to process minerals, production of gas and coal, and so on. So this illustrates why a municipal 100% renewable energy target needs to be connected at the provincial level with renewable energy targets. Likewise, for food and manufactured goods shipped to Saanich, and the regional, national, and even international transportation systems, these all ultimately need to be addressed to get to 100% renewable energy. So back to Saanich and addressing the buildings. The building as usual projection moving from 2016 to 2050, is population driven, and we're talking about Stats Canada forecasts roughly a 17% increase in the 34 years from now until 2050. And so we're 111,000 up to 130,000. And in terms of energy use for buildings, I'm assuming here that there will be only a modest increase in the efficiency of buildings. And the trend for oil and propane would be that it would be slowly replaced by natural gas. So what if we were to move to a 100% renewable energy solution? This is just one scenario. There are others. But I'm assuming here major building envelope upgrades, walls, roofs, foundations, windows, to achieve what is called a passive house standard, which means such efficient insulation for homes and other buildings that the space heating requirements are virtually eliminated. However, I'm assuming that this standard will only be achieved for 1/3 of the building stock. And the reason why is that that would cover the newly built homes, and it would recover a small number of renovations. And generally, making a renovation to this high of a standard is very challenging, and I am assuming that for most buildings, that high of a standard won't be achieved. So this is one assumption of mine. It could be varied in a different scenario with different savings, energy saving results. And if looking at the bar on the far right, right at the top, you will see that the passive house assumption that I make here takes us over half of the way down from 2050 business as usual to the 100% renewable energy scenario. So next, I assume that about half, I assume that just about all the space and water heating furnaces and boilers have been replaced by air source and ground source heat pumps. And these heat pumps are powered by renewable electricity, courtesy of BC Hydro. Heat pumps can actually produce more usable energy than they consume, and I'm not going to explain here why that is, but it is mature technology, it's not magic, and I have calculated that heat pumps can take us about 1/3 of the way from business as usual down to the 100% renewable energy scenario. Heat pumps can be for individual homes, even for individual rooms, or they can be larger plants that supply heat to several buildings, even for whole neighborhoods. This is another choice point. We could give heat pumps a bigger role or a smaller role in this scenario, depending what we think would be most practical. Now, I'm assuming a certain amount of energy savings coming from increased zoning density to create more compact built form and to support the more walkable communities concept in the neighborhood. So this means that between now and 2050, instead of building approximately 50-50 between detached housing and apartment style homes, I'm assuming here that all the new buildings would be of a multi-unit kind, the apartment style or condominium style. So this is another choice point that we find. And finally, in this scenario, I'm assuming that not all building owners will be persuaded or induced to switch to heat pumps. A few furnaces and water boilers will remain, and to make them carbon neutral, the natural gas will be replaced by renewable biomethane. And here I'm assuming that biomethane can indeed be produced in a more or less greenhouse gas neutral manner, and this is another choice point. You don't see it in this diagram, but I'm also assuming that solar photovoltaic generation will be maximized in Saanich. All the roofs that can take it will take it, and this will produce, at a very rough estimate, 500,000 gigajoules of energy, or approximately 10% of the energy used in the 100% renewable energy scenario. So now to transportation, and you can see right there a very interesting contrast to the situation of buildings. In this forecast, I'm assuming that just in the business as usual scenario, there will be already a big reduction in the use of energy, and that's because I believe that whatever we do here in Saanich, there's going to be a big shift towards electric vehicle transportation rather than fossil fuel powered vehicles. I'm assuming that commercial vehicles will tend to keep using gasoline and diesel or switch to natural gas. And particularly with heavy freight, I'm assuming that it will be switched to liquefied natural gas. This is a transportation solution currently being supported by governments. It improves air quality, but it yields little, if any, reduction in energy use or greenhouse gas emissions. So an 85% or so reduction in fossil fuel use is good, but as you can see here, I think we can do even better. We can get to practically no fossil fuel use at all with transportation, and mode shifting is the key here. Getting out of personal vehicles into transit, onto bicycles, or onto foot. And to make this palatable, we have to make the transit service more frequent and convenient. We must also reorganize our communities somewhat so that shopping, services, work, and recreation are close to our homes. When people can walk to most of their daily needs and bicycle or take convenient transit for longer trips, there will be much less incentive to use or even to own personal motorized vehicles. And mode shifting, as you can see on the right-hand bar, could cut 3/4 of the business as usual energy use. I'm assuming here that all transit and commercial vehicles will be electrified, and that efficient trip planning will also be used to reduce the number of commercial vehicle trips. And finally, I'm assuming that heavy freight transit will be electrified on southern Vancouver Island, B, undergo efficient trip planning to reduce the number of trips and reduce the number of half-full trucks, and C, be converted from diesel and gasoline to renewably produced biofuels. And as with biomethane, there's an assumption here that the biofuels could be produced in a manner that is carbon neutral and that does not cause a lot of other problems. So I don't have time to talk about different levels of jurisdiction in any detail, but we all need to be aware that different levels of government do have different powers, and we all need to be engaged. Sampling some measures and seeing how personal action relates to community action. As an individual, one can switch to transit, biking, or walking. In order to make that really work, we need Saanich to support and create those walkable neighborhoods. Saanich can make aerial maps of solar potentials and thermal leakage from the roofs of our communities, and that's what Betsy described for the city of Osnabrück in Germany. And with that information available, individuals can do energy efficient upgrades to their homes, and they can install photovoltaic cells where they have the potential. As an individual, you can switch from oil or gas heating to a heat pump, let's say a district heat system, and Saanich can plan and zone to create those district heating systems that you can plug into, and so on. There are many different solutions. So thank you very much for listening. This is probably much too fast to go through this amount of information, and I will leave you with this. We, the BC Sustainable Energy Association, hope to be presenting this analysis that I did, together with the feedback that we get from you today, to Saanich Council, and hoping that this will be in January 2017, in the new year. And so we hope that you can all come to that meeting when and if it's scheduled. In the meantime, I hope you will all write to your council member and tell them what you think about 100% renewable energy by 2050. And that goes for Saanich, and it also, for those of you who are not from Saanich, write your own councillor. So thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Tom. As Tom pointed out in his analysis, we have the means for all of what Tom has described. And I liked how he said it's not magic. We have these technologies and these choices today. So really it's about choosing to do them. And it's if and not when. But if you could please help me in thanking them for their presentation.